You're listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is Pulitzer Prize-nominated national and international best-selling author and just a wonderful man, Noah Benshea. And we're going to be talking about his film entitled Jacob the Baker, which I had the privilege of seeing at the Illuminate Film Festival this past month, and it's just a truly inspiring film. So I'm really excited to having you on the show, Noah.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, Jen.
Oh, you're very welcome. No, it's very, very true. It comes from the heart for sure. There's so much I want to ask you, but we'll talk about the film. Let's talk about the film, how the film became, and how you decided to do this film and why you decided to do it.
Well, I wrote Jacob the Baker over 2 years from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning, 35 years ago. And when the book was published, Random House was very excited and took the book out. And the book was translated into 18 languages, embraced around the world. And over the next period of time, there have been 3 additional books in the Jacob the Baker series, primarily following my own journey over the last period of times in my life. And across time, many people approached me about making Jacob the Baker into a motion picture, and I felt, because of the embrace that Jacob had engaged around the world, that I was very much a guardian of this character. People often said, "Are you and Jacob the same?" And my answer was, "We are, except I'm the one with character flaws in the process." So I was very cautious. And then about 4 years ago, at the insistence of a director friend of mine, I was asked to come on stage one night in a one-man show as Jacob the Baker. And after that experience, people came up to me and said, "What other cities are you going to take this to?" And I wasn't so interested in taking this and being on the stage in other cities. And so I woke up the next morning about 3 o'clock in the morning and said, "I'm going to produce this motion picture. I'm going to make this into a film." And if I had known what I was doing, I never could have done it. I had a couple of very, very successful producers who knew about my work and wanted the world to know about what Jacob had to bring to the world. One of them is a man named Stephen Rails, who produces all of Wes Anderson's films and was nominated for the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Mm.
The other was Mark Johnson, who won an Academy Award for Rain Man and produced Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. And both these men, they were real allies in this process. And I was blessed to bring together a great team. Director, composer, cinematographer, and a very special ally in the team was a woman named Wendy Kaut, who had been a student in a class I taught many years ago. When I was a very young man, I was a dean at UCLA, and she was in a course I taught, and she later became a screenwriter and TV writer. And she was a very close ally in this, and as a co-producer, co-writer in the film. So I guess this is really this is a long answer to a short answer, that
No.
this was a love affair after 4 decades. And this is the first film I'd ever produced. And when CAA, which was very helpful to us in obtaining we have a distribution arrangement across North America with all the major platforms. And when CAA had a screening for a number of the film executives in the industry, Mark Johnson introduced the film. And after the film, a number of people came up to my wife and said, "Your husband's a great actor." And she looked at him kind of dumbfounded, and she said, "He's not an actor. This is who he is." So I am who I am in the film. Honesty, I think, is the passport in this film. And a reach out to humanity has been the ally. We shot the film around the world in the middle of COVID. And the film was shot in Copenhagen, Milano, Jerusalem, Seoul, Korea, and back in Los Angeles. So again, this is a long answer to this film is a love affair, and it appears to be very much a love affair with those who see the film.
Oh, yes, definitely. No question about it. Wow. Amazing. So there's so much to dive into. How did you choose the each individual story? How did you choose the people that were in the story, and why did you choose them? You know, how did you choose them and why did you choose them? And then is that why you went around the world to film this? It's the production of this film is really stunning. It really truly is. And as is the music. And we'll dive into the music a little bit too, because I just thought I love the song. And we'll talk a little bit, unless you want to talk about that now, but lots of questions there.
The stories were primarily chosen because these were story themes or ideas or queries that I had received from people both in North America and around the world. And when the film was first screened, a number of the executives film executives said, "Well, there's no sex, there's no violence in this film. How will anybody ever be interested in this film?" And what they missed was the storylines that we picked uh, deal with parenting, addiction, fidelity, faith, economic pressures, and time and the toil it plays in our lives. And we live in tribal times, but I can assure you that addiction doesn't care how you voted in the last election. And Fidelity doesn't care if you're a Democrat and Republican. These are all equal opportunity employers, and people who question their faith in life are people on both the right and left. So these are huge topics in lives that we address and speak to through my character, Jacob the Baker. And we chose these topics because we thought these were really, really the most relevant topics in people's lives. We get lost in issues of how you dress or how you speak or political stance, but you might take. But as Jacob says in this movie and from a book I wrote, people of all faiths are of one faith if their religion is kindness. And so we were trying to speak to the major issues in life. There are 23 million people in this country suffering from addiction, and only 3 million are in treatment. And for every person suffering from addiction, there's 5 people impacted: a wife, a husband, a father, a daughter, an employer, somebody who works for you. So with 25 million people suffering from addiction and 5 times, that's roughly 150 million people. That's half the population of the United States. So the audience in this film is anyone who is living I say in the United States, but it's a global film, and it speaks to people around the world who are plagued by all the struggles that life brings in all of our lives.
Yeah. You know what? Before we go any further, let's let the audience know what Jacob the Baker's about. Here we are. If I started right away, and they're probably going,
Okay,
what are they talking about?
I'll give you a shorthand on this, perhaps, because I've been asked this question a few 5, 10, or 1,000 times.
I'm sure.
And Jacob is a poor but pious baker who lives an anonymous life in a timeless world. And while he's waiting for the oven to come to temperature in the morning, he writes little notes to himself, trying to make sense of life to himself. And unknown to him, one of his notes falls in the mixer, gets baked into a bread, and is purchased by a woman who, when she opens the bread, finds this note with something on the note that speaks very poignantly to, to her life. And she wants to know how this note comes to be in her bread. So she rushes to the bakery, and there she meets this rather amazing man named Jacob the Baker, who doesn't want to be thought of as amazing and is just as glad to be left alone. But when she pursues him with questions about life and his answers, word begins to spread among the people in the village, and soon many other people are coming to him with questions about life and prayer and friendship. And the children come after school and sit on the flour sacks and listen to his stories. And the movie tells the story of people around the world who have reached out to Jacob via the man who wrote the book, the guy you happen to be speaking to today, and questions about in their life. So that's how the story formed. But the film is not the theme of the book, which I just mentioned, but the film is about this, and the director really poignantly wanted to speak to it. How is it that people write or reach out to someone they know to reach out to a fictional character through the author
Right.
and to talk with him about these things in life. And at this point in my life, as um, somebody had said that Noah's a 2,000-year-old teacher temporarily inhabiting a younger man's body. So whenever I speak to a group of people who are 60 or 70 or 80, I always say it's a pleasure to speak to kids like you. So I feel that I'm here. I know that the two great days in your life are the day you're born and the day you know why you're born.
Mm,
I'm here to be a source of strength to others. To some extent, that's a chosen path. To some extent, that's a revelation, and a great often experiences in our lives are when we find that our life is often a revelation to ourselves.
beautiful. Beautiful. It's so true. So, at what point did you realize that this 2,000-year-old entity was inhabiting you and needed to speak? I mean, how did this all come about in your life that you, because you're the words of wisdom, you've done many things and you're yeah, I mean, it just your career has been very interesting, that you've talked in front of the Library of Congress and the U.S. Department of Defense, and just that alone kind of is sort of amazing. And how did this all come about? And at what point was there a moment, or is this just a path that you felt your entire life, that you knew that there was something, that these words because what you'd say are words that people need to hear, but they're so beautifully said and in such a wonderful way that people can hear them. So often people don't hear what people have to say.
I've suggested to people that if you want to, people often think if you want to meet a person of faith, you have to meet a member of the clergy. But I think if you really want to meet a person of faith, meet an artist, meet a writer, meet a composer, and certainly meet a poet philosopher, because this is not a path one takes to fast funding. You know, being a poet philosopher, particularly when you're younger, is like throwing rose petals over the Grand Canyon and waiting for the echo. You know, it's an isolating experience. And I must say that in many ways, for me, uh, this was a mosaic. And when I say a mosaic, it was as if there were different tiles being placed down in my life at different times in my life where the question was whether I had the courage to be who I am. There's something I wrote one time, is the great challenge in life is daring to be who you are.
Mhm.
The opportunity in life is daring to be who you might yet become. And I've sort of accepted that this is why I'm here. Oftentimes I meet people, I must tell you, and they are less interested in my ideas and more interested in how I ever monetized being a philosopher so I
Mhm.
could do what I do in my life. So I don't, the answer was that things like this, they creep up on you in ways you don't quite expect. They aren't like you want to be a dentist, you go to undergraduate and graduate school, then you do this intern, and then you're a dentist. Um, Jeff Brotman, the chairman at Costco, found Jacob the Baker, was very moved by it. Gave the book to Howard Schultz because he was on the board of directors of Starbucks. And Howard Schultz, in an article in Success Magazine, started writing that they asked him how he built his company. And he said, I read from the Jacob the Baker to my senior executives. And Howard eventually and I asked if we might not be friends. And at one point, Starbucks took quotes of mine and put them on 30 million Starbucks coffee cups. And some people at Costco who connected with my work at one point, they turned and took 900,000 Jacob the Baker loaves of bread. I can assure you that these were not plans that I woke up with one day and said, I'm going to do this. There is as much as something is served to you, and for everything that has been served, there have been opportunities on the buffet table that I have passed on because they didn't ring with the authenticity that I wanted that I wanted to bring to what I'm doing. There's a scene, while the film I think is truly scripted by Gev Marone and Wendy Kaut and myself, but there were a number of times in the film where I knew what the one actor was going to say to me, a reporter who plays a key role, but she didn't know what I was going to say. And
Oh.
at one point, she asked me a question, and I talk about that I'm going to wait up at night to make sure she's okay when she comes home. And I tangentially began speaking about how my mother would be there when I came home. And I come from a very blue collar family. I was the first person in my family that graduated from high school, let alone from the university. And that was my rocket ship out. I did well academically, but I said my mother would be there in her green house dress with her hair in rollers and a coffee cup that we got from saving money from stamps at a gas station. And when I begin telling the story, I become very misty-eyed in
Mm-hmm.
the film.
Mm-hmm.
And the reporter was sitting there sort of dumbfounded because she didn't know what I was going to say, nor did I know before I started riffing, if you would, on this.
Mm-hmm.
And the director, we finished the scene. He said, that was great. Okay, now we're going to take that scene from this angle. And I said, no. As the producer, I could tell the director. He said, no. And I said, no. He said, why? I said, because if I do it again, I'll be acting.
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
this film, if it has a passport to people's emotions, the authenticity of it is the honesty of it. There's an old film with Burl Ives in Cat in a Hot Tin Roof,
Yeah.
where he walks around saying, mendacity, mendacity, I smell mendacity. Um, I didn't want people to watch Jacob the Baker and smell mendacity. I didn't want them to smell dishonesty. I wanted them to know that this was a very honest piece of work
Yeah.
uh, over a lifetime.
Yeah. Very pure. You know, I did not feel you were acting at all in this film. I felt like you were just channeling.
They asked me at one point, the other producer allies, we had one more scene in the film that's not in the film, and they thought it was a little bit, it wasn't as relevant in as many people's lives. And they said, we want people to know that attend this film that you're the same person in the film as they would meet if you met them for a cup of coffee. And they said, do you have an experience like that in your life recently? I said, I've had an experience like that in my life most recently. And they said, what was it? I said, well, about a month ago, I was for a number of years, I was a national philosopher for people dealing with addiction in the country. And I spoke across the country on this issue, which I think is, I'm not in recovery, but the issue is everybody dealing with addiction. It's a reflection of something you're not dealing with in your life.
Mm.
And I wanted to speak to it. So I was coming out of this hotel. I had a very early flight the next morning, that morning, and I was in Phoenix. And I come out, and there was an Uber there waiting for me. And I get in the back of this car, and I couldn't see the guy in the front. He was a very large black man, and I could just see his neck. And he said, uh, pretty fancy dresser. He must be a successful guy. I said, well, I'm like, they had that. And I said, I'm just coming out of this. I had a talk last night, and and he said, how you doing? I said, I'm okay. How you doing? And he said, well, I've been better. He said, I had a very uh, major role in industry in my life. And then I had a stroke,
Mm.
and I lost my job and was absent of wealth. And my life has very little meaning to me right now. I'm an Uber driver. So my heart raced for this guy who I'd never met before and who I still hadn't seen. I only saw him by the broadness, wet of his neck.
Wait, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. It's just like, it's amazing that you just step into the Uber and starts telling you what's really going on in his life. I think, I mean, for you to be the right person to be telling that story to is amazing. Go on.
Oh,
Sorry.
I've been told that before. I think people know me as a white light. I think people feel very comfortable talking with me because they sense that I'm an ally and I'm not there to take something. I'm
Mm.
there. So my heart went out to this guy. So I wanted to relate to him. I said, let me tell you a story. And I had never written the story before. I said, let me tell you a story of a tree that became a great tree. And it was a huge tree, and everybody would admire it for everything, how big and powerful it was. And one day it was struck by lightning from nowhere. And the tree just was like it died. It became these dried humps of branches. And somebody came and chopped the tree down and took the wood into a very poor farmhouse and next to the fireplace. And each morning now, the little boy who lived in that house would put a piece of that wood in the fireplace and dream of what he was going to do in his life. I said, there may be things that are going to happen in your life out of what you've been that are going to be just as important as they were before, but will have been transformed from what you were before.
Mhm.
And the guy says to me, I got to pull over. I said, why do you have to pull over? He says, because you're making me cry, because I'm making me cry. And it was out of this experience when the producer said we need another scene that we put the scene in the film. When you see the film, I'm speaking to the people who are with us, if I might say with us in this moment, and see Jacob the Baker on Amazon Prime or Tubi or Vudu. There's a scene, there's a scene where I get into an Uber after my evening on stage, and you'll see that connection. And there's a scene in there which that's reminiscent during the Revolutionary War. There's a story where we'll take it as true, where a revolutionary soldier had been badly wounded, was standing by a river and unsure how to cross, and three officers on horseback show up, and the soldier says to one of them, "Would you take me across the river?" And one of the officers says yes, and he pulls the young soldier up onto the back of the horse, and they cross the river. And on the other side, the soldier gets down, and the officer that took him across said, "There's three officers here. Why did you ask me to take you across this river?" And the soldier said, "Because some people have yes written across their forehead, and some people have no written across their forehead. And I saw yes on yours." Now they tell the story that this officer was George Washington. But I think that people, when they meet me, see me as a man who has yes
Yeah.
written on his forehead.
You just gave me chills. Goosebumps are all over. Oh, wow. What an honor to have you on the show today, really. And we're not done yet. So I just feel blessed to have
Yeah.
you on the show, Noah. Really. I was blessed to have met you at the Illuminate Film Festival, but even more so to have this deeper conversation with you now. It's a true blessing. So thank you.
I want to share with you, Jan, that in Hebrew, the word for bridge is gesher. And a gesher has a sacredness to it because in the show, you are a gesher. You are a bridge between me and the people who are listening, who will visualize, who will see this, and you will bring us together. And there will be people who I've never met and you've never met who are going to be touched by this conversation. And they're not going to send me $5 and they're not going to be writing me a letter, but you'll make a difference. There was a time when somebody asked me if they could take thoughts of mine and put them on patient trays in the hospitals. And I said, yes. And they did that. I live in Santa Barbara, a group of major hospitals in Santa Barbara. And then somebody else came to me and said, could we do this? He wanted me to meet a major sugar manufacturer. And could we do this? And they started doing it, and Costco had it and stuff. And they said, I want you to take Noah's thoughts and put them on a sugar packet, and people will steal a lot of them and we'll make a lot of money. These were these guys said. And they said, what would you call it? I said, I call it sugar for the soul.
Mm.
And so they sold for about half a dozen years. This was out there in a lot of places, maybe 250 million of these quotes of mine on sugar pack. And people said, well, why did you do this? I mean, it's like, again, this was not the fast track to big riches. I said, because I imagined there was some guy who was a truck driver up in Spokane who was going through a divorce and was 11 o'clock at night. And he was feeling so depressed, and he was shaking down a sugar packet to throw in his coffee. And he saw a quote that said, no one has ever found their way who has not felt lost. And he said, no shit. And for 5 seconds, he was a little less lonely in this lifetime. That's what I do.
Yeah.
What I do.
Yeah. So beautiful. So beautiful. And you're right. That's why I love what I do, because I get to exactly that, spread the word
You're the
about
bridge.
films.
You bring people. You're the bridge between and that experience, and you bring it together, and that is a gestalt, where 1 and 1 is 3 for sure. That is
Thank you, Noah. Wow, wow, I could talk to you a lot more, but unfortunately our time is up. But let's tell the audience where they can. I know you snuck it in there a little bit earlier, but let's tell them again where they can see
Well, part of
Noah
me,
the Baker.
Jacob, I appreciate it. That happens all the time. You told people to see Noah the Baker. It's Jacob the Baker.
Oh, Jacob. Oh, what
Noah.
did I say?
No, you have no idea how many times that's happened in my life.
Oh, there you go,
Where
Jacob the
and
Baker.
I'm hoping, I'm flattered. I hope Jacob is. And I must remember my mother, who's passed now, anyway, would always, she says, don't forget to tell people where so my mother is reminding me in my ear, as you are, Jacob the Baker, a major feature film, an hour and 20 minutes, now streaming on Amazon Prime, Vudu, Tubi, On Demand, Cox, Infinity. I'd get Amazon Prime is easy. It's it's $3 or $4 to see this. Invite some people over, see it with your friends, see it with someone you love, and pass the word, because when you do that, you'll be making a difference in the lives of others. And as Jacob the Baker would remind us via Noah Benshea, your guest today, of all the things you can make in life, why not make a difference?
Thank you.
Jacob the Baker on Amazon Prime, my friend. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you. Thank you, Noah. Thank you so much. Truly a blessing. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Amen.